They walked right past her, laughing, plates full. Not one asked if she'd eaten. Evelyn Monroe, self-made founder and widow, didn't flinch. Tom, her polished son, called himself the future of the company she built from dust. By the next sunrise, every deed, account, and signature he'd claimed control over would slip through his fingers. She'd spent a lifetime raising heirs. Now she was choosing an honest stranger instead. And when her family came looking for her legacy, they'd find it locked behind a name they'd never bothered to learn. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. They walked right past me laughing, plates full. Not one of them asked if I'd eaten. That was the first thought that stuck, sharp and unrelenting, as I sat at the edge of the long reunion table. The smell of roasted pecans and barbecue sauce filled the air, mingling with expensive perfume. The banners overhead bore my company's logo, Monroe Landscaping, the same oak tree emblem I drew one humid night on butcher paper with a borrowed pen. Back then, that tree meant family roots. Tonight, it felt more like a family tree that had quietly cut me from its branches. Tom stood center stage under the string lights, microphone in hand, looking every bit the heir he believed he was. His voice boomed with confidence. "The Monroe legacy," he said, flashing that politician's grin he'd inherited from his father, "has always been about vision, about growth, and about the new generation leading the way." Applause rose like a polite storm, predictable, practiced. My name never crossed his lips. I watched him talk about his team, his strategy, his leadership, each word polishing me out of the story like I was a smudge on a family portrait. I sipped my sweet tea and felt the ice tap my lip. The sound was louder to me than the applause. Haley sat near the front, perfectly posed in a gold dress, her laughter cutting through the hum of the room. She leaned toward Megan, whispering just loud enough, she should really retire. The sting wasn't in the words. It was in how deliberate they sounded. Like a performance for the table, like cruelty rehearsed. Megan's eyes darted toward me, then away. Guilt flickered there, faint and weak, like a light bulb about to die. I smiled anyway, small, practiced, polite. The kind of smile women like me learn to perfect when everyone's watching and no one's seeing. Beside me, Linda exhaled through her nose, a soft whistle of disapproval. She'd been my accountant, my conscience, and my only real friend for 20 years. Her hand brushed mine under the table, a wordless act of solidarity. "They think they erased you," she murmured. "Make sure they remember your handwriting." I let the words settle like a slow drip of bourbon, burning, clarifying. Tom raised his glass. "To family," he said, as though the word itself had never betrayed anyone. Glasses clinked. I raised mine halfway, only to watch the light bend across the rim. In that moment, I saw my reflection, calm, invisible, dangerous. The servers began clearing plates. One of the younger ones hesitated when he reached me. "Mrs. Monroe," he said softly, "do you want me to save your place for dessert?" I shook my head. "No, thank you. I've lost my appetite." As he moved on, I caught Tom's voice again. Charming investors, quoting figures I'd written by hand long before he knew what a ledger was. My chest tightened, not with anger, but with something older. Grief, maybe, or recognition that I'd been dismissed from my own story. Linda leaned close again. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm listening," I replied. "People tell you who they are when they think you've got nothing left to give." The room shimmered with laughter and wine. I let it all wash over me, every careless word, every absence of mine in Tom's speech. I studied them the way I used to study drought forecasts, calm on the surface, calculating where the cracks would appear first. When the speeches ended, the band struck up a slow country tune. Couples swayed under the lights. Tom twirled Haley, her smile wide and perfect for the cameras. I stood to leave, but no one noticed. Outside, the air was thick and warm, the lake reflecting streaks of gold from the house lights. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the muffled sounds of celebration from inside, my family's laughter echoing through the glass. Linda joined me a minute later, her heels clicking softly against the deck. "You look like a storm holding its breath." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'm just done holding anything." I turned back toward the glowing windows, the life I'd built, now occupied by strangers with my last name. And right then, in that quiet Texas night, I felt the first flicker of something steady and cold. Not sadness, resolve. They could keep their speeches, their applause, their hollow toasts. The next move would be mine, and I wouldn't need a microphone to make it heard. The drive home was only 30 minutes, but it stretched like a confession I didn't want to finish. The roads outside the Monroe Ranch were dark and smooth, the kind of darkness that keeps secrets. My headlights cut through it in long, pale ribbons, glinting off the occasional fence post or mailbox. Every few miles, a lone porch light blinked from a neighboring property. Small, stubborn reminders that other people were sleeping soundly while I chewed on the taste of humiliation. The laughter from the banquet still echoed in my ears. I could see Tom's hand resting on Haley's back as he introduced her. The backbone of our growth. The phrasing played over and over like a cruel jingle. I remembered when those same words had been used for me in trade magazines. Evelyn Monroe, the backbone of Texas soil supply. Back then, I wore pride like perfume. Tonight, it smelled sour. The dashboard clock glowed 11:47 p.m. I turned down the long gravel drive to my lake house, the only place that still felt like mine. The crunch of tires on stone was comforting, predictable. Inside, the house greeted me with silence so thick it almost had a pulse. The air was warm, untouched. I didn't bother turning on the main lights, just the kitchen lamp. A soft golden glow spreading across the tile like a sigh. I kicked off my heels by the door, toes aching. On the counter, a half-empty tin of coffee waited from this morning. I filled the kettle, watched steam rise, and thought about every glance I'd caught tonight. Megan's practiced indifference, Haley's thin smirk, Tom's careful performance. Family dinners had always been political, but this was something different. This was erasure with silverware. The kettle whistled, high and shrill. I poured the water, the sound a small rebellion against the quiet. The smell of strong coffee filled the room, grounding me. I took the first sip standing at the counter, my reflection faint in the window. A woman who'd built an empire from clay and conviction, now invisible in her own story. The aftertaste hit hard, not just of coffee, but of realization. I crossed to the den, turned on the small desk lamp, and pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were the old ledgers, real paper, ink-stained, each page smelling faintly of the past. Every figure, every supplier, every handwritten note told the story of a time when I mattered because I worked, not because of who I married or what I passed down. My fingers found a faded invoice from the very first client I ever landed, Mrs. Hollis, the retired teacher who'd ordered 20 bags of soil and sent me home with cookies. I smiled, a small, private smile. I used to believe effort earned respect. I hadn't realized how quickly inheritance could rot it. The phone buzzed softly on the desk. Linda. I hesitated before answering. "Still awake?" "Barely," she said, voice rough with fatigue. "But I had to check on you. That crowd tonight could bruise a saint." I let out a breath, halfway between a laugh and a sigh. They want a world without me in it, Linda. I might just grant that wish. There was a pause. Then, softly, Evie, don't do anything you can't undo. I looked down at the ledger, my handwriting, looping and steady. Maybe undoing is the only thing left. We said goodnight, but I didn't hang up right away. I listened to the faint hum on the other end until it turned into silence. Then I reached into the bottom drawer of the desk and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside lay my late husband's fountain pen. Heavy, black lacquer, gold trim. The nib was worn. The way he'd liked it. I ran my thumb along the metal until a thin line of ink marked my skin. He'd used this pen to sign our first business license. I'd used it to sign our mortgage. Now, maybe, I'd use it to sign the end of an era. The clock struck midnight. Somewhere outside, the lake rippled under a restless wind. I opened a fresh page in the ledger. The paper felt alive beneath my hand. I uncapped the pen, and for the first time in years, the sound of ink meeting paper made me feel awake. Dangerous, even. Each stroke was deliberate. Each line, a quiet declaration. They wanted me gone. So I began writing the terms of my disappearance, the kind that would leave them speechless when they realized what absence really meant. Morning came slower than usual, the kind of slow that feels deliberate, like time itself was deciding whether I deserved another start. The lake outside my window shimmered in the early sun, and for a moment, I let myself believe the night had just been a bad dream. But then I saw the ledger still open on the desk, my handwriting sharp against the paper. The truth stared back, inked and irreversible. I showered, dressed, and tied my hair in the loose knot my husband used to call my thinking bun. My kitchen clock said 8:12. Too early to start a war, but just right for coffee. The cafe sat downtown, wedged between a boutique florist and a law office. I'd been coming here for years. Quiet mornings, strong coffee, nobody calling me mom or ma'am unless they meant it. The bell over the door chimed as I stepped inside, releasing the scent of roasted beans and cinnamon. "Good morning, Mrs. Monroe," called the barista behind the counter. Young, polite, name tag reading Tyler. I remembered him vaguely from company picnics, one of the part-timers from the warehouse. Hard worker, always early, rarely spoke. "Morning," I said, slipping into my usual corner by the window. When he brought my cup, he hesitated. "Ma'am, hope you don't mind me asking. Your son said you'd step down from the company. That true?" The question landed like a pebble in still water, small but widening. I met his eyes. Honest eyes, brown, steady, curious, not gossipy. "Did he now?" I asked, voice calm but edged. He looked nervous. "Sorry, I didn't mean... It just surprised me. You built that place." I stirred my coffee slowly, the spoon clinking against the porcelain. People love to decide a woman's story before she's finished telling it. He nodded, awkward but sincere. "I get that. My ex-wife decided mine halfway through." He said it with a half smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. Something about his candor disarmed me. "You've got kids?" I asked. "Just one. Emily. She's 10. Smart as a whip. I'm working double shifts trying to keep her in that private school her mom picked. Guess pride's expensive." His tone wasn't self-pitying, just honest. The kind of honesty that doesn't advertise itself. "You like working at the company?" I asked. He shrugged. "It's work. Pays the bills. But I like the people. Your old foreman still runs things fair. Says you never asked anyone to do a job you wouldn't do yourself. That's rare." I sipped my coffee, hiding a small smile. He's right about that. He looked at me, studying for a moment, then added quietly, "I hope you don't step down, ma'am. Feels like when good folks leave, the bad ones spread out." The line hit harder than I expected. I didn't answer, just nodded. He took that as a cue and walked away to tend another table, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the smell of burnt toast. When I finished, I slipped $100 bill beneath the saucer. On the napkin beside it, I wrote in my neat script, "Honesty is rare. Keep it." As I stood to leave, I glanced back. Tyler was clearing another table, sleeves rolled up, focused. The kind of man who worked like he owed something to the world instead of expecting the world to owe him. The cafe door chimed as I stepped out into the sunlight. The city was waking. Delivery trucks rumbling, office workers hurrying past, a dog barking somewhere down the block. I felt something small shift inside me. Not peace exactly, but clarity, like spotting a trail in the woods you hadn't noticed before. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed. Linda. "Morning," she said. "You sound too quiet. Coffee not strong enough?" "Maybe I found something better than caffeine," I said, starting the engine. "Oh? A miracle?" "Something like that. A reminder that not everyone takes without giving back." Her voice warmed with curiosity. "You sound lighter." "Don't read into it. Just thinking." She chuckled. "Be careful. Thinking is dangerous for a woman like you. Next thing I know, you'll be buying a mountain or running for mayor." I smiled, watching sunlight cut across the windshield. "Maybe I'll do something smaller," I said. "Something quieter." "Now that," Linda replied, "sounds like the start of trouble." I didn't deny it. I just ended the call and sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the city around me. A city that still had my fingerprints all over it, whether they wanted to admit it or not. Then I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My lipstick was fading, but my eyes looked sharper than they had in years. "Let them think I've stepped down," I murmured, because I hadn't stepped down. I'd simply stepped aside to find my next move. By the time I reached the office that morning, the air already felt off, too brisk, too polite. The receptionist smiled the way people do when they've been told to. Her "Good morning, Mrs. Monroe" sounded rehearsed, like a formality left over from a tradition no one respected anymore. Tom's assistant met me outside the glass conference room. "They're all inside, Mrs. Monroe. Mr. Monroe said it's urgent." Mr. Monroe. I almost laughed. That title had belonged to a man who'd earned it. Inside, the boardroom gleamed. Polished oak, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Austin skyline. It used to feel like command. Now it looked like theater. Haley sat near the head of the table, back straight, smile sharp. Megan fiddled with her phone, pretending disinterest. Tom stood at the head, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled like he'd been working. I knew the act. I'd invented it. "Mom," he said, feigning warmth, "glad you could make it." "I own the building, Tom. It'd be odd if I couldn't." Haley chuckled lightly, but Tom shot her a look. "Not yet." He gestured toward the empty chair across from him. "Sit down, we'll get right to it." I didn't sit. I wanted them to feel my height, my presence, a reminder that I'd spent half my life standing while they were still learning to walk. "We've been talking to investors," Tom began, pacing slowly. "There's interest in scaling the company, national distribution, digital expansion. We've got momentum, but we need modern leadership to get there." "Modern leadership," I repeated, rolling the words around like they were something I might spit out. "And who exactly fits that description?" Haley leaned forward, voice smooth. "We just think it's time for a new phase. You've done so much, Evie. But it's a different market now. Faster, riskier. You should be enjoying your life, not signing off on logistics." Megan didn't look up from her phone. "It's time, Mom," she said simply, as if repeating something she'd practiced. I studied their faces. Not one of them flinched. The betrayal wasn't impulsive. It had been organized, scheduled. "Interesting," I said. And this meeting, is this the part where you tell me what you've already done? Tom exhaled. We didn't want you blindsided. The transition is happening, with or without your approval. The investors needed confidence in new management, so we... He hesitated, glancing toward Haley. I stepped closer to the table. You what? Haley's smile tightened. We moved some of the banking arrangements under the new operating entity, just to streamline things. You'll still have your dividend, of course. My dividend, I echoed softly. So generous. I opened the folder in front of me. My own records. The numbers were already shifting, accounts renamed, signatures updated. My name missing. Tom tried for a conciliatory tone. Mom, this is business. You taught me that. We can't run a 21st century operation with 20th century methods. Tom, I said, my voice steady, low, almost kind. You don't have a business because you're clever. You have one because I was relentless. Don't confuse the two. Haley's fingers tapped against her water. Glass. We're not your enemies, Evie. No, I said. You're worse. You're amateurs. Megan looked up then, startled, like she'd just realized this wasn't going to be another easy surrender. Tom's jaw tightened. Don't make it difficult. Oh, honey, I said, smiling. Difficult built this empire. The room went still. Even the city noise outside seemed to hold its breath. He tried again, softer now, almost pleading. You've done enough, Mom. Let it go. Let me take it from here. I closed the folder, letting the sound punctuate the silence. You already have, apparently. I just hope you know what you've taken. Tom straightened, mistaking my calm for defeat. Good. Then we're all on the same page. I leaned in slightly, voice cool and deliberate. Not quite. I write my own pages, Tom, and I never let anyone else hold the pen. Haley opened her mouth to speak, but I was already walking toward the door. Evie, Tom started. I paused, my hand on the glass. You'll find out soon enough who this really belongs to. Their reflections wavered in the polished surface. 3 people who thought they'd won something. As I stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed. A message from Linda. Call me. Just got an interesting email from the bank. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd had in days. Let the children play, I murmured to myself. Mama's still got the keys. And as the door shut behind me, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was my opening move. The bank email Linda mentioned was brief, 2 sentences and a signature line. But it was enough to keep me awake most of the night. By sunrise, I was dressed in navy, my late husband's old cuff bracelet clasped around my wrists like armor. The morning air carried that early October chill Austin gets when it can't decide between summer and fall. The city was waking up, but I was already in motion, driving toward an office I hadn't stepped into since the funeral. Bennett and Rowe, etched brass on frosted glass. My husband's old law firm. I could still picture him here, late evenings signing documents I never questioned. Back then, trust was the language of marriage. Now it was a luxury I couldn't afford. The receptionist, a woman about my age, recognized me instantly. Mrs. Monroe, she said, standing quickly. It's been a long time. Too long, I replied. Is Richard in? He is. I'll let him know you're here. Moments later, Richard Bennett appeared, thinner, grayer, but still with that measured calm lawyers cultivate like a second skin. Evie, he said, smiling warmly. Come in. You look exactly the same. I doubt that, I said, taking a seat in the old leather chair across from his desk. I need you to help me untangle something. He nodded, folding his hands. Tom again? Tom, Haley, Megan. Take your pick. They've been playing house with my company's accounts. But before I play back, I need to know what I'm holding. Richard adjusted his glasses, pulling a slim folder from a cabinet. "You're still listed as the primary shareholder, Evie. Always have been." I frowned. "I thought after Charles passed, ownership was split between me and the kids." He shook his head. "That's not what Charles's will says. It left you full and permanent ownership, not co-ownership. He wanted the transition to happen only after your death through your trust." The room tilted just slightly. "You're saying—" "I'm saying," Richard interrupted gently, "they have no legal control. They're figureheads at best. They can't access funds, move assets, or make official decisions without your signature." I let the words sink in. All that noise in the boardroom yesterday, the posturing, the condescension, it was nothing but theater. Richard smiled faintly. "Evie, you could sell the company tomorrow if you wanted." I leaned back in the chair, a slow, quiet breath escaping me. "Tomorrow sounds about right." His brows lifted. "You're serious?" "Deadly," I said. "Draw up what you need. We'll start with a transfer of majority control to an external trust. I'll name the trustee later." Richard hesitated. "You realize the fallout, right? The press, the family, the investors." "I've been invisible for a while now, Richard. I doubt anyone will notice until the ink dries." He gave a small, knowing smile. "Still as composed as ever. I'll have the documents ready this afternoon." When I left the office, the sky had turned bright and unkind. The city traffic thrummed around me, horns and engines blending into a low hum, like applause I hadn't asked for. I didn't drive home. Instead, I went straight to Linda's. She answered the door barefoot, coffee in hand, robe half-tied. "I figured that text meant war," she said. "Not war," I replied. "Correction." I stepped inside, handed her a copy of the legal summary Richard had emailed to me already. She read fast, always had, and halfway down the first page, her mouth fell open. "Evie," she whispered, eyes wide, "you mean to tell me you own all of it? Every damn share?" "Every damn one," I said, pouring myself coffee. "Seems my husband trusted me more than my children do." She let out a low whistle. "So what now? You call their bluff?" I looked out the kitchen window. The morning light hit the dew on her backyard fence, bright and cold. "No," I said. "I let him believe they've won." Linda raised an eyebrow. "You're really doing it?" I turned back to her, voice steady. "They wanted me gone. Let's see how they like absence with consequences." Linda's laugh came out sharp. "Oh, honey, that's not absence. That's an earthquake." "Good," I said, finishing my coffee. "Let them feel the ground move." For the first time in months, my hands didn't shake. The fear was gone, replaced by something simpler, purer. Not revenge, correction. I picked up my purse, the folder tucked neatly inside. "Tell me something, Linda." "What's that?" "How loud do you think silence can get when it's planned properly?" She grinned. "Loud enough to break glass." "Good," I said, heading for the door. "Because tomorrow we start shattering." By Monday morning, the air inside Monroe Landscaping felt different. Not louder, just heavier, like the building itself was waiting for something to happen. I didn't walk through the front entrance this time. I took the side stairwell, the one that led straight to the operations floor, where real work still smelled like diesel and wet soil instead of perfume and spreadsheets. The warehouse hum steadied me. Forklifts beeped in the distance, boots scuffed concrete, radios murmured weather reports. My kind of music. I walked past a few employees who nodded, cautious but polite. Word had already started to drift. Rumors of a transfer. Whispers about whether the old guard was really gone. I smiled at that. People tend to whisper when they sense power shifting. They just never guess in which direction. "Morning, Mrs. Monroe," said Carlos, one of the foremen. "Didn't expect to see you down here." "I needed air," I said. Tell me something, Carlos. Who's still showing up early these days? He blinked, surprised. Not many. Tyler Brooks, maybe. That guy's always first in, last out. Doesn't say much, but everyone trusts him. Even when the younger ones complain, he stays steady. Steady, I repeated. That's rare currency lately. I made a mental note, thanked him, and walked the length of the floor, letting my heels echo across the concrete. Every sound reminded me, I'd built this. Not them. Me. By noon, I was sitting in a quiet corner booth at Miller's Cafe, the same one where I'd first spoken to Tyler. I'd sent a simple message through HR. Lunch. Noon. Confidential. He arrived 5 minutes early, still in work boots, a clean shirt. Eyes uncertain, but respectful. Ma'am, I hope I'm not in trouble. Trouble's not my department anymore, I said, smiling. Coffee? He nodded, sitting across from me, posture straight, hands folded like a student expecting a quiz. I've been asking around, I began. Your name keeps coming up. Hard worker, reliable, honest. You make that a habit, or is today just your good day? He laughed quietly. Every day's a good day if it ends without mistakes, ma'am. Good answer, I said. Tell me something, Tyler. What makes a good leader? He hesitated, then spoke carefully. Someone who doesn't hide behind titles, someone who remembers what it's like to earn a paycheck instead of inherit one. I tilted my head. That sounds rehearsed. He shook his head. No, ma'am. Just learned. There it was again. That unpolished truth. The kind that didn't need an audience. You've got a daughter, right? I asked. Emily? Yes, ma'am, 10. Smart as anything. I'm just trying to keep her steady through all the grown-up stuff. Divorce? He nodded once. Her mom's remarried. Money's not their problem anymore, but it still feels like mine. Something in his tone, not self-pity, just the plain fact of a man doing what's necessary, landed deep. I saw echoes of the early years, me and Charles, scraping together payroll, delivering mulch in the same truck that carried groceries. I leaned forward. Tell me, Tyler, if you had to choose between losing money or losing your word, which would you pick? He didn't flinch. My word, every time. Money can come back. Reputation doesn't. I let the silence stretch between us, warm and deliberate. Finally, I smiled. Small. Real. Careful. That kind of talk gets you responsibility. He looked at me, puzzled. Responsibility for what? I waved off the question. You'll find out soon enough. He laughed nervously, then stood as I slid a 20 across the table for the check. Thank you for lunch, ma'am. Thank you for the reminder, I said. After he left, I sat for a moment, watching him cross the parking lot. No swagger, no entitlement. Just purpose in motion. My phone buzzed. Linda. Tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing, she said. I don't know, I replied. Depends on what you think I'm doing. She exhaled hard. Evie, you can't hand your life's work to a stranger. No, I said softly, watching Tyler climb into his old pickup. I'm handing it to someone who still values effort over entitlement. There was silence on the other end. Then Linda said, half admiring, half terrified, You sound like a woman who's already decided. I have, I said. Now I just need to make sure the ink doesn't dry too slow. The call ended. I slipped on my sunglasses, stepped into the sunlight, and felt the ground steady beneath me. Some revolutions start with a bang. Mine started with a lunch receipt and a name scribbled in the margin of a contract draft. Tyler Brooks. The man who didn't yet know he was about to inherit a kingdom built on silence and soil. The next morning, the sky was the color of wet slate, calm but promising a storm. I like that kind of sky. It kept people honest. I parked outside Bennett and Rowe again, heart steady, mind already 10 steps ahead. Richard greeted me at the door, his tie a little crooked, coffee in hand. "You don't waste time, Evie," he said. "Time's a luxury I've learned not to rent," I replied. We walked into his office where the contract draft already waited on heavy paper. My name printed bold across the top. His assistant shut the door behind us and Richard slid the folder toward me. "As discussed," he said, "this establishes a conditional transfer of ownership. The recipient holds full control for 5 years under your oversight clause. At the end of that term, you can renew, revoke, or finalize the sale." "And confidentiality?" I asked. "Built in. Not a word leaves this room." I traced a finger along the typed lines, letting the reality settle. It was all here. The empire I'd built, ready to move from bloodline to merit. Richard studied me. "Have you chosen your trustee?" "I have." He leaned back. "Someone from inside?" I smiled. Someone the insides overlooked. By noon, I was parked outside Miller's Cafe again. Tyler's truck was already there. The same dent in the passenger door. Same clean dashboard. He was punctual to a fault. Inside, he was waiting in the corner booth, cap in his hands like he wasn't sure if he should take it off or hold it as a shield. "Mrs. Monroe," he said, standing when I approached. "You wanted to see me?" "Sit down, Tyler." He did, eyes cautious. I placed the folder between us. "I need you to read this." He hesitated, looking from the folder to me. "Ma'am, is this about the warehouse?" "In a way," I said. "Go ahead." He opened the folder, scanning the first page, then the second. I watched his expression shift. Confusion first, then disbelief, then outright panic. This says you're transferring ownership," he stammered. "To me?" "That's right." He pushed the folder back like it was on fire. "Ma'am, I can't accept this. I'm just honest," I interrupted. "Hardworking, dependable, everything the others stopped being." He shook his head, voice trembling. "I don't understand. Why me?" "Because you remind me of who I was before I forgot what mattered." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting toward the window as if fresh air might solve it. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," I said. "I know that when my family tried to erase me, you were one of the few who still said my name with respect." He swallowed hard. "Respect's just doing what's right." "Exactly." He looked down again, whispering, "Ma'am, I'll ruin it. I'm not trained for this." "You'll learn," I said softly. "And if you don't, it'll go back to me in 5 years. It's a trust, not a gift." He exhaled, shaking his head. "I'd rather lose money than my word, remember? This feels like I'd be stealing something that isn't mine." "Then don't steal it," I said. "Earn it." He met my gaze, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Legacy should be earned," I continued quietly, "not inherited. I made that mistake once." Richard entered the cafe then, briefcase in hand. Tyler turned as if for rescue, but Richard only nodded. "Mrs. Monroe, everything's in order. Just needs signatures." Tyler stared down at the papers. His hands shook as he picked up the pen. 5 years, he murmured. 5 years, I confirmed. He signed, the sound of pen against paper louder than the hum of conversation around us. When he handed it back, his palm was slick with sweat. "It's done," I said. "Congratulations, Mr. Brooks." He blinked. "I don't think that's the right word, ma'am." "Maybe not yet," I said, reaching into my bag. From a small velvet box, I withdrew a heavy gold ring, my husband's company ring, engraved with the Monroe oak. I set it gently on the table between us. He stared at it like it might vanish. "It's yours now," I said, "but keep it quiet. For now, silence is strategy." He picked up the ring carefully, as if holding history. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," I said. Just build something that proves I wasn't wrong about you. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere over the city. Low, promising. Tyler slipped the ring into his pocket, still pale, still stunned. I stood, gathering the folder. "Mrs. Monroe," he said as I turned to go, "what are you going to tell them?" I smiled faintly. "Nothing. Because by the time they find out, talking won't change a thing." It didn't take long. 3 days, to be exact. That's how long peace lasted before the storm came knocking. Not politely, but with a fist. I was in the kitchen when I heard the tires screech up the driveway. Through the window, I caught the blur of Tom's black SUV, crooked across the gravel like he'd forgotten how to park. The slam of the car door rattled the air before his voice did. "Mom!" The screen door banged open a second later. He didn't wait for an invitation. Why did payroll bounce? His face was red, the vein in his temple already pulsing. "Half the staff called me this morning. Checks void. Accounts locked." "What the hell did you do?" I didn't look up right away. Instead, I poured boiling water over the tea leaves, letting the steam rise between us like a curtain. "Good morning to you too." "Don't start," he snapped. "Answer me." I set the teapot down gently. "Ask your new CEO." For a beat, he just stared. The words didn't land right away, and then they did. His expression twisting between disbelief and insult. "What does that even mean?" Before I could answer, another car door slammed outside. Haley's voice sliced through the air before her heels hit the tile. "Tom, what's happening? The investors are calling me like I'm supposed to have answers." "Maybe you should have thought of that before you tried to play executive," I said, still not raising my voice. Haley's eyes snapped to me, sharp and glossy. "You sold us out, didn't you? You sold the company to someone else." "Not sold," I corrected. "Transferred." "To who?" she demanded. "Some random worker?" Megan appeared in the doorway behind her, quieter, arms crossed. "Mom, please tell me you didn't do something irreversible." I smiled faintly and began pouring the tea, one cup, then another. The sound of liquid meeting porcelain was the only calm thing in the room. "Exactly what you asked," I said, handing Megan a cup. I stepped aside. Tom's laugh came out short and sharp. "You can't be serious. You'd rather give our company to a stranger than to your own family?" I met his eyes then, so much like his father's, except colder. Family stopped being family the moment they turned inheritance into entitlement. He took a step closer, voice rising. "Mom, you've lost it. You can't just—" "Oh, but I can," I interrupted softly. "Because it was mine to give. Still is, technically." The room went quiet. Haley's eyes darted toward Tom. Megan's fingers tightened around her cup. The only sound left was the soft tick of the kitchen clock and the faint hiss of the kettle cooling on the stove. Haley finally spoke, her voice thin. "You don't know what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done," I said, sitting down at the table. "I freed myself from ungrateful shareholders." Tom's jaw clenched so hard I could hear the teeth grind. "This is insane. You gave it to— what, some warehouse guy?" I took a slow sip of tea. "He's not some warehouse guy. He's the one who actually knows how the business runs." Megan stepped forward, tentative. "Mom, please. We can fix this. We can bring it back under family control before word gets out." I looked up at her, the only one whose voice still carried traces of decency. "You can't fix what was never broken, sweetheart. You just didn't like who was holding it together." The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Tom turned away, pacing, hands raking through his hair. "This will ruin us. You've embarrassed us all." I set my cup down carefully. "No, Tom, you did that yourselves. I just gave the world a clearer view." Haley crossed her arms, spitting the words through clenched teeth. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, standing. But regret is honest. You should try it sometime. Tom stopped pacing, his voice low now, dangerous. You've made an enemy out of your own son. Then you were never much of a son to begin with, I said, steady and quiet. The air in the room went still. Haley's lip trembled. Megan's eyes shone wet. Tom's fists opened and closed at his sides before he finally turned for the door. Don't call me when this blows up in your face, he said. I won't need to, I replied. You'll see it on the front page. They left in a flurry of anger and perfume, tires spinning gravel against the walls of my house. When the sound faded, I stood alone in the doorway, the kettle finally cold, the cups still half full. Outside, the wind picked up. The first breath before a storm. I smiled faintly. The silence was back again. Only this time, it belonged to me. When it happened, I wasn't watching live. I was pruning roses on the back porch, the radio playing low, the kind of morning that could almost pass for peaceful. Then Linda called. Twice. Turn on Channel 5, she said without preamble. Her voice had that pitch that comes with witnessing something historic or scandalous. Sometimes both. I wiped my hands on my jeans, went inside, and turned on the TV. The screen cut to the downtown Marriott ballroom. Our old company banners stretched behind a podium. The words, Monroe Landscaping, building integrity from the ground up, gleamed like prophecy. The crowd was a mix of reporters, employees, and half the city's business elite. And standing behind the microphone, wearing a dark suit that looked borrowed but pressed, was Tyler Brooks. He cleared his throat once, the microphone squealing softly, then steady. Some of you already know there's been a change in leadership. Mrs. Evelyn Monroe has stepped back and asked me to take the company in a new direction, one focused on fairness, honesty, and hard work. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed like lightning. He paused, his hands gripping the podium. I'm not her blood. I'm not family. But I am part of what she built. She told me something I'll never forget. That legacy should be earned, not inherited. The room fell utterly silent. I felt my pulse in my throat. Tyler glanced down at his notes, then back up. Mrs. Monroe trusted integrity over inheritance, and I intend to prove her right. That line, integrity over inheritance, hit like thunder. You could almost hear the story crystallize in real time. By afternoon, it was everywhere. Retired founder chooses worker over family. Texas business matriarch breaks the mold and the rules. Monroe family snubbed as warehouse worker named successor. The words ran across every news ticker, every social feed, every whispered conversation in every Austin cafe. The city loved a scandal, especially one wrapped in justice. Linda showed up unannounced, tablet in hand, grinning like she'd just watched karma do a cartwheel. You're trending, she said. Number 3, right between a celebrity divorce and a Senate hearing. I poured her a drink. Well, I said dryly, that's one way to retire. She laughed, scrolling. Listen to this. A woman who built an empire with her hands just handed it to another pair of working ones. They're calling it poetic. I tried not to smile, but it crept through anyway. Then her expression shifted. You know who's not poetic? Your son. He's doing damage control. I just watched him on local news talking about miscommunication within the company. Poor man looks like he's chewing nails. I took a sip of whiskey, letting the warmth hit slow. Let him talk. He's had enough practice rewriting my story. By evening, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Reporters, old colleagues, even former rivals wanting a comment. I ignored every one of them, but one call I answered. Megan. Her voice was small, raw around the edges. Mom? Sweetheart. I can't go anywhere without people asking if it's true. You picked a stranger over us? I stayed quiet long enough for her to fill the silence with her own emotion. You humiliated us, she whispered finally. You humiliated your family. No, I said softly. You excluded me. I just made it official. She started to cry, not the loud kind, the quiet, contained sobs of someone realizing too late what they lost. Megan, I said, voice gentler now. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it to end the hurting. There's a difference. She didn't answer. The line went quiet, then clicked dead. Outside, the sun was dropping low, painting the lake gold. The reflection shimmered, steady, calm, untouchable. Linda was still reading headlines aloud from the couch. You realize you've become some kind of folk hero, right? Half the women in Texas want to send you flowers. I don't need flowers, I said. I just needed to stop being invisible. She smiled. Well, you're glowing neon now, honey. I turned back to the window. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, not threatening this time, just announcing something new. For the first time in years, the world was saying my name again, and for once, it wasn't followed by anyone else's. By the end of the week, the Monroe name had gone from a badge of legacy to a headline of scandal. And while the city's chatter was loud, the silence inside my son's mansion was louder still. Linda called it the sound of paper collapsing. His accounts froze this morning, she said, half worried, half satisfied. Payrolls rerouted, expense cards declined. You could hear the panic through the phone line. I didn't gloat. Not out loud. I just stirred sugar into my tea and watched the spoon spin slow circles. Consequences, I murmured. They're overdue. Haley, however, didn't believe in silence. The first crack in their marriage came in the form of a voicemail I wasn't supposed to hear. Tom must have butt-dialed me during one of their fights. You promised me security, she shouted. Not shame. Everyone at the club knows. They're laughing at me. Tom's reply was a growl, half strangled. You wanted the spotlight, Haley. Well, congratulations. Now you're in it. The message cut off with the sound of something shattering. I didn't replay it. I didn't need to. The next day, I drove to their house, quietly, without warning. The gate guard recognized me immediately, his posture softening with something like pity. Morning, Mrs. Monroe, he said. Guess it's been a rough week. Guess so, I said. Inside, the house looked immaculate as always. Designer furniture, polished marble floors, everything expensive enough to hide misery. The nanny opened the door, startled. Oh, Mrs. Monroe, I didn't know you were coming. I'm not staying long, I said. Just here to see Emily. She hesitated, then nodded. She's in the playroom. I found my granddaughter sitting cross-legged on the rug, coloring. Her hair was pulled back in two messy braids, her tongue poking out in concentration. She didn't look up until I crouched beside her. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, Grandma. Her smile faltered after a beat. Mom says you're mean. The words were soft, matter of fact. Kids repeat what they hear, unfiltered and cruel without meaning to. I took a slow breath. Then she doesn't know kindness yet. Emily studied me for a moment, brow furrowing like she was trying to solve a math problem she hadn't been taught. You don't look mean, she said finally. That's because I'm not, I replied, brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. Sometimes being brave gets confused with being mean. It happens to grown-ups when they're scared. She nodded solemnly, accepting that as truth. Do you still like drawing? I asked. Yeah, I'm making a garden. She turned the page to show me, rows of uneven flowers, big sun, a little house. In the middle, she'd written, Grandma's Garden. It nearly broke me. That's beautiful, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. You have your daddy's patience, and maybe a little of my stubbornness. She giggled. Daddy says you're very stubborn. I'll take that as a compliment. Before I left, I slipped a small white envelope into the front pocket of her backpack. My handwriting across the front. For Emily. Do not open until your 18th birthday. Inside was the trust documentation, modest by corporate standards, but enough to start a life built on her own choices, not anyone else's. A gift of freedom disguised as a letter. When I walked out, Haley was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, face pale and furious. "You're not welcome here," she said. I paused, glancing past her shoulder at Emily's small figure still coloring. "You don't have to welcome me," I said quietly. "You just have to raise her better." Her lips parted, but no words came. I left before she could find any. Later that evening, Linda and I sat on my porch, whiskey in hand, the sun sinking red over the lake. "You really did it," she said. "A trust fund for the granddaughter of the woman you just dismantled." "She's innocent," I said. "And she's the only Monroe who still remembers how to create instead of consume." Linda chuckled, shaking her head. "Revenge wrapped in love, poetic." "Not revenge," I said, watching the ripples across the water. "Redirection." She raised her glass. "To redirection, then." We clinked glasses, and for a moment the sound was almost joyful. But somewhere behind that quiet satisfaction, I could feel it. A shift in the air, like tension before a second storm. Because peace, in this family, never lasted long. And the next wave, I knew, would not come from me. Tyler called me late on a Thursday, his voice tight, careful, like he was trying not to wake his own fear. "Mrs. Monroe," he said, "I think we've got a problem." I set down the ledger I'd been reviewing and pressed the phone to my ear. "Tell me." He hesitated. "Investors are getting nervous. They've been calling all week, asking if I plan to maintain traditional Monroe operations." "Meaning?" "Meaning they think I can't lead," he said finally. "Half of them won't return my emails. One of them told me point blank he didn't want to take direction from a man who used to load fertilizer trucks." The words hit harder than I expected. I'd been the first woman in Texas to chair a supply consortium. I knew the tone he was describing, the tone that said, "You don't belong here, and you never will." "Then show them," I said quietly. "Show them what?" "What real leadership looks like." I let the pause stretch. Humility, steady hands. No grandstanding, no apologies. Just results. He let out a long breath. "That's harder than it sounds. Everything worth doing is." After we hung up, I sat in the stillness of my living room, the lake visible through the window like an open wound reflecting the moon. This was the risk I'd chosen, transferring not just ownership, but the weight of a legacy. And now it was pressing down on him. Over the next few weeks, word spread fast that the warehouse kid was trying to right the ship. He started at the bottom, literally, walking the yards, talking to drivers, reviewing supply routes himself. Within 2 weeks, he'd rehired 15 workers Tom had laid off in his expansion spree. Within a month, delivery efficiency was up nearly 40%. Linda forwarded me an article from the Austin Chronicle. "Monroe landscaping rebuilds from the ground up," literally. I smiled at the headline but couldn't bring myself to celebrate. Because with every line of praise came new whispers about where he came from, how long he'd last, and who was really pulling the strings behind him. The first sign of trouble came one night just after dusk. A stone shattered the glass window of the main office. No note, no spray paint, just a clean, violent crack across the glass. Tyler brushed it off as kids, but the next morning, a letter appeared under his windshield wiper. "Go back to the warehouse where you belong." By the third week, 2 more notes showed up. One slipped under his apartment door, one mailed without a return address. No signature, but I could smell the handwriting. Tom's circle. Old investors, bruised egos, and the kind of men who mistake inheritance for identity. When Tyler called to tell me, I could hear the strain in his voice. "I can handle it, ma'am," he said, but his words carried the crackle of exhaustion. "Handling it doesn't mean bearing it alone," I told him. "Let me talk to security. Will—" "No," he interrupted gently. "If I let you fight my fights, then they're right. I don't deserve this seat." I went silent. Because he was right. When the call ended, I sat in the dark, listening to the clock tick, the kind of sound that measures more than time. For the first time since this began, I wondered if I'd been wrong, if passing the torch had meant tossing it into a man's bare hands. The phone buzzed again, an hour later. "Linda. Please tell me you're not blaming yourself for this," she said the moment I answered. "I gave him fire," I said quietly, "and now he's the one getting burned." "You gave him fire," she corrected, "because the world needed to see it lit again. Some burns are worth it, Evie." I looked out at the water where the moon's reflection broke in the ripples. Beautiful, fragile, untouchable. "Not if it costs him everything." Linda's voice softened. "You can't protect a legacy and test it at the same time. You have to choose." I didn't respond. The line hummed quietly between us. Out on the lake, thunder flickered in the distance, faint but closing in. I realized then that this was no longer about business or family or even redemption. It was about endurance. And for the first time since this war began, I wasn't sure who would outlast the storm. The stranger I trusted, or the ghosts I'd created. It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of Texas morning that looks clean until you step outside and realize the heat's already waiting to bite. I was on the porch when Tyler called. His voice sounded off. Low, cautious. The way people talk when they've just seen something ugly and can't decide whether to name it. "Mrs. Monroe," he said. "Tom came to the office." My hand stilled around the coffee cup. "When?" "10 minutes ago. He's still here." I could hear the muffled shouting through the phone, Tom's voice sharp and venomous, carrying across the warehouse floor. Tyler lowered his voice. "He's in my office right now, threatening to sue, demanding access to accounts. Said he'd bury me if I didn't step down." I closed my eyes, breathing slow. "Is he drunk?" "Not enough to blame it on that," Tyler said grimly. "I'm recording him. I figured you'd want proof." A faint click. Then Tom's voice came through the receiver. Raw, furious. "You think you can take my company?" he snarled. "You're nobody. You shove bags of mulch, you don't sign contracts. I'll have every investor you scared off crawling back by Monday. After I drag your name through every paper that'll print it." Tyler didn't respond. The silence on the recording was louder than the yelling. Then Tom's tone dropped, cold and cutting. "You think she's on your side? She's using you, boy, same way she used everyone else who mistook her for a savior." The sound that followed wasn't words, just a thud. Tyler must have slammed his hand on the desk or the recorder slipped. When he spoke again, his voice was steady. "You should leave, Mr. Monroe. You're trespassing." That was it. The call ended. An hour later, Tyler texted me the file. I listened twice. The recording sharp and undeniable. Every word, every threat, perfectly preserved. Linda came over when I called her. She listened too. Arms crossed, expression unreadable. When it ended, she let out a long exhale. "That boy's brave," she said. "Stupid maybe, but brave." "I'm done watching men like Tom break what they can't build," I said quietly. That afternoon, I drove into town. No fanfare, no dramatics. I walked straight into the Travis County Sheriff's Office and handed the recording to a detective I'd known since my days supplying half their landscaping. "This is harassment and corporate intimidation," I said simply, "and I want it documented." The detective, a patient man named Hartley, nodded. "We'll handle it discreetly, Mrs. Monroe. You've done the right thing. By the weekend, the story broke. Local news first, then regional. Police inquiry launched into Monroe family dispute. Then, sources confirm recorded threats from heir apparent Tom Monroe against new company CEO. The headlines spread like wildfire. Tom's pride, so carefully curated, ignited itself. Investors cut ties overnight. Contracts froze. His personal accounts were audited. Haley's name started trending. For all the wrong reasons. By Monday, she filed for separation. The press release cited financial misconduct and emotional cruelty. Linda called that morning, voice tight but gleeful. It's done. She's turned on him. He'll blame me, I said. He already does. But blame can't unring a bell. Megan's response came quieter. A short email with no greeting, no signature, just 6 words. I can't do this anymore, Mom. I read it 3 times, then deleted it. That night, I sat by the lake alone, the air heavy and still. Tyler texted to say he'd hired extra security and that production was back on track. He ended the message with, "You were right about humility. It works." I stared at those words for a long time. When I finally looked up, the moon was reflected in the water, fractured by ripples, but still whole. Linda called just before midnight. "You quiet, Evie. Too quiet. What's on your mind?" I smiled faintly into the dark. Just thinking how family ends where gratitude dies. She didn't speak for a while. Then softly, "You really think this is the end?" I looked at the lake, its surface calm but deceptive. "No," I said. "Endings don't come this clean." Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled again. Low, stubborn, promising. Because I knew Tom, and men like him never go down quietly. It was late afternoon when Tyler called. The kind of Texas light that looks golden until you realize it's just the day giving up. His voice had that mix of disbelief and quiet accusation only the honest can manage. "Mrs. Monroe," he said, "I think I found something you didn't tell me about." I set down my pruning shears, dirt still under my nails. "Is that so?" He hesitated. "Yeah. I was reviewing the original trust paperwork for the board review next month. There's an addendum, one I hadn't seen before. It says that after 5 years, ownership reverts unless the company's community outreach program expands by at least 50%. I smiled, slow and small. "I wondered when you'd find that." "So you did know." "I wrote it." Silence. Then the faint sound of his exhale, part laugh, part frustration. "You tricked me into building something bigger." I brushed the dirt from my palms. "I didn't trick you. I trusted you. You could have just told me. If I had, you'd have managed to meet the requirement. I wanted you to exceed it." He was quiet again, but I could hear the shift. The sound of understanding settling in, reluctant but real. "I thought you wanted to walk away from all this," he said finally. "From the legacy, the noise, your name." "I did," I admitted. "But walking away doesn't mean leaving it to rot. Legacy's not about ownership. It's about stewardship. You were never meant to keep it. You were meant to grow it." He let out a slow breath. "You know, you make it hard for a man to feel accomplished." "That's the point," I said. "Comfort breeds complacency. I gave you a company. You turned it into a cause. Now finish the job." There was a pause, then his tone softened. "I've been thinking about something. You might not like it. Try me. I want to add your name back to the board." My laugh caught halfway between surprise and protest. "Absolutely not. I wanted freedom, not titles." "This isn't a title," he said. "It's acknowledgement. You deserve to be there. Honorary chairwoman. No responsibilities, no signatures. Just a seat that says you're the reason this place still breathes." I looked out over the lake, the reflection of the sky bleeding orange into silver. Tyler, I said gently, I've spent half my life proving I belong at that table, the other half realizing I don't need to sit at it anymore. Then don't do it for you, he said. Do it for what comes next. For the people who need to see what earned looks like. That one got me. He knew exactly which string to pull. Not pride, but purpose. I'll think about it, I said, though we both knew I already had. The next morning he came to see me. He didn't bring press or papers or even his usual leather notebook. Just himself, a little sunburned, a little tired, still stubbornly decent. We sat outside on the porch. He looked around the garden, the rows of lavender and sage I'd planted decades ago. You really built this place by hand? He asked. Every inch, I said. Even the mistakes. He smiled, then reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. My husband's ring. The company ring I'd given him months before. He'd polished it, the gold catching the morning light. Shouldn't you be wearing that? I asked. He shook his head. It was never mine to wear. Just to honor. He slid a folded document across the table. I made it official, he said. Honorary chairwoman. No obligations, no meetings. Just your name where it belongs. I stared at the paper for a long time. Then quietly, you didn't need to do this. He smiled. Maybe not. But I wanted to. I took the pen he offered. My husband's old fountain pen. The same one that had started all this. The ink flowed smooth and dark as I signed. When it was done, I sat back, feeling something I hadn't in years. Not triumph, not vindication. Peace. Tyler stood, pocketing the document. You earned both, he said. Freedom and respect. As he walked to his truck, the wind picked up, scattering the lavender petals across the porch. Linda stepped out from the kitchen, coffee in hand. You look lighter, she said. I am, I said. Turns out letting go doesn't always mean losing. She smiled knowingly. Careful. That almost sounds like closure. Maybe, I said, watching Tyler drive away. Or maybe it's just the calm before the next beginning. Because every ending I'd ever known had looked like this. Quiet, golden, and dangerous with possibility. And this time, it felt earned. A year later, the banners went up again. Only this time, they weren't mine. They read Monroe Landscaping Annual Reunion. 1 year of renewal. Same oak tree logo, same polished floors, same string lights curling across the ceiling. But the air was different. Lighter. Earned. I stood near the back of the room, where the light didn't quite reach, watching people fill the hall. Not the investors and socialites who used to crowd this place, but workers. Yard crews, delivery drivers, office clerks with calloused hands and real laughter. The kind of people who built the bones of everything. Tyler had insisted I come. You have to see it for yourself, he'd said. You'll like the view from the back this time. He was right. It was a better view. I spotted Tom before he saw me. He stood near the buffet, jaw tighter, hair grayer. The arrogance had drained from him, replaced by something close to discomfort. Megan was beside him, quieter, her eyes soft, but tired. Haley wasn't there. I'd heard she'd taken the separation money and moved to Dallas. Some silences write their own endings. Tom noticed me eventually. Our eyes met across the room. No words, no gestures, just recognition. He looked away first. Linda arrived halfway through the speeches, late as always, her heels clicking like punctuation. Well, she whispered, leaning toward me. It's poetic, isn't it? 1 year later, and they're the guests at a table they once owned. I wouldn't call it ownership, I murmured. More like tenancy. Their lease expired. She smirked, sipping her wine. And now you're the ghost of the landlord. Before I could reply, the lights dimmed slightly. Tyler took the stage. He didn't need a microphone. The room felt quiet just by his presence. He wore a simple gray suit, sleeves rolled up the way my husband used to. Behind him, a new slogan stretched across the banner: "Integrity grows here." "Thank you all for coming," he began. "A year ago, I didn't think I'd make it a month. But I had good soil under me. I had people who believed that hard work means more than inheritance." Polite laughter rippled through the room. Soft, knowing. "And most of all," he continued, "I had someone who believed in me before anyone else did. A woman who taught me that leadership isn't about standing in the spotlight. It's about knowing when to hand it to someone who's ready to earn it." He turned then, eyes scanning the room until they found me. "Mrs. Evelyn Monroe," he said, "this company, this family, wouldn't exist without your faith. Everything here today is built on it." The applause started slow, hesitant, and then it swelled. Real applause, not the polite, performative kind I used to endure at board dinners. Even Tom clapped, half-heartedly at first, then with both hands, shoulders slumped. Megan followed, tears catching the light. I stayed still, letting the sound wash over me. The echo of gratitude, unfamiliar, almost foreign, felt heavier than I expected. When it quieted, Tyler stepped off the stage and walked straight toward me. "Told you the view from the back was better," he said under his breath. I smiled. "It's quieter, too." "Not for long," he said, nodding toward the crowd. "They're waiting for you." "I've had enough stages for one lifetime," he grinned. "Then let the applause be your speech." As he walked away, I noticed Haley's absence more clearly. Her empty chair near the front, the untouched glass of champagne beside it. Ghosts don't need invitations, I thought. Linda nudged me. "You didn't lose family, Evie," she said softly. "You curated it." I let out a small laugh. Maybe so. Sometimes strangers remember what blood forgets. The room had already shifted to music and chatter, people mingling around trays of food and laughter that sounded like something alive again. I stood at the edge, one hand resting on the back of an empty chair. My chair once, now just another seat in a circle that had grown beyond me. Tom approached, stopped a few feet away. His voice was rough, almost a whisper. "Mom, I didn't think you'd actually make it here." "I almost didn't," I said evenly. But then I remembered. This place was never about who shows up. It's about who stays standing when the storm passes. He nodded, eyes down. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I know," I replied. "That's why I came." He looked like he wanted to say more but didn't. Instead, he turned and joined Megan near the exit. They left hand in hand, small and quiet against the noise of the room. Linda joined me again, raising her glass. "Funny," she said, "how silence sounds sweeter when it's respect." "Or maybe," I said, watching Tyler laugh with the crew that used to fear boardrooms, "it's just peace, finally earning its place." Outside, the evening light broke over the city. Golden, forgiving. And for the first time in a long, hard story, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. The lake was still that morning, still enough to mistake its reflection for sky. I parked by the old oak tree, the one Charles and I used to sit under with thermoses of coffee and talk about everything we couldn't afford yet. The waterline was low, the season between rain and drought. Typical Texas. Too much or too little. Never in between. I carried a small leather ledger under my arm. Not one of the corporate ones. This one was older, softer. The spine cracked when I opened it, pages yellowed from decades of hands and ambition. Each line told a version of my life. Suppliers, losses, profits, debts paid, dreams postponed. But today, I wasn't here for balance sheets. I sat on the wooden bench facing the water and turned to the last page. The columns were empty. Beneath them, in steady ink, I wrote the final line. Final transaction, peace. The ink bled slightly into the page, permanent. It felt right that way. Imperfect, but final. A wind rippled across the lake, carrying the smell of cedar and memory. I could almost hear Charles laughing beside me, that low, easy sound of a man who believed work could fix anything. I'd spent years proving him half right. Behind me, tires crunched on gravel. I turned to see Tyler's old pickup pulling up beside the oak. The passenger door opened and a small girl hopped out. Pigtails, freckles, a familiar spark in her eyes. "Grandma Evie," she called, waving a folded piece of paper. "Emily." Tyler followed, slower, holding a basket in one hand and a cautious smile in the other. "Hope we're not interrupting," he said. "You're exactly on time," I replied. "I was just closing a book." "Figured you might be hungry," he said, setting the basket down. "Linda said you forget to eat when you're sentimental." I smirked. "Linda says a lot of things." He chuckled, unpacking sandwiches and lemonade. Emily handed me her drawing. "I made this in art class," she said proudly. The paper was covered in color, bright, bold lines, a big building with the Monroe oak logo above it, surrounded by people holding shovels and flowers. At the center stood a woman with silver hair, smiling. Underneath, in careful handwriting, she'd titled it, "Grandma's Company." I swallowed against the tightness in my throat. "It's beautiful," I said softly. Tyler glanced at the picture, then at me. "She's been asking a lot about you. Wants to know how someone becomes brave." "Tell her you start small," I said. "You plant something and protect it until it grows, even if it grows in directions you didn't plan." Emily grinned, oblivious to the weight behind the words. "Daddy says you built everything." I smiled. "No, sweetheart, I just made sure it didn't crumble." Linda arrived a few minutes later, sunglasses hiding eyes that had seen too much and still missed nothing. "Well," she said, settling beside me on the bench, "look at this. A whole table's worth of redemption. And sandwiches." "Don't start," I said, but she was already pouring lemonade into paper cups. We ate by the water, laughter breaking up the quiet like sunlight through branches. Tyler talked about expansion plans, new partnerships, scholarships for employees' kids. The outreach program had tripled in a year. The company was thriving, but more than that, it was alive. "You did good, Tyler," I said finally. He shook his head. "We did good." "No," I said, eyes on the horizon. "You grew something I could never have, a future that doesn't need my name on it." He smiled, soft and sure. "Maybe, but your name's still in every corner of it." Linda raised her glass of lemonade. "To strangers who become family," she said. "We all lifted ours." "To family," Tyler echoed. Emily clinked her paper cup against mine, giggling. The sound carried across the lake, bright, fleeting, unforgettable. Later, when they left, I stayed behind for a while. The sun dipped lower, turning the water into gold. I closed the ledger and set it on the bench beside me. Some stories end with applause, some end with silence. Mine ended with both. As the wind lifted again, I whispered into the still air. Not to anyone, just to the memory of what once was. "They ignored me completely," I said, smiling, but my silence wrote the loudest ending of all. The lake shimmered like approval. The world, for once, didn't argue.